Ed Sullivan, the stone-faced titan of 1950s and 60s TV, ruled America's living rooms with his Sunday night variety show, a cultural juggernaut that launched stars from comedians to crooners. But his bombshell revelation before his death, naming six singers he secretly loathed, sent shockwaves through fans and industry insiders, exposing a hidden rift between the straight-laced host and the wild energy of rock and roll. Sullivan's show was the ultimate stage, a make-or-break platform that could catapult an unknown to stardom. But behind the curtain, his conservative values and obsession with family-friendly fare put him at odds with the era's boldest voices, especially those shaking up music with raw rebellion. The claim that he hated six singers, Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, James Brown, and others in the rock and soul vanguard, stemmed from his discomfort with their untamed styles, provocative lyrics, and the cultural upheaval they sparked, a clash that defined his uneasy role as both gatekeeper and reluctant kingmaker. Elvis Presley, the pelvis-swiveling sensation, was the first to rattle Sullivan's world, bursting onto the scene with a raw, bluesy charisma that had teens screaming and parents clutching pearls. His 1956 TV appearances on shows like Milton Berle's, where his hip-thrusting hound dog performance ignited a firestorm of outrage, branded vulgar and animalistic by critics, made Sullivan, a devout Catholic guarding his show's wholesome image, vow never to host the young rocker. Elvis's gyrations were a cultural Molotov cocktail, embodying a youth-driven rebellion that horrified Sullivan's sense of decency. But ratings were the ultimate trump card, and when Elvis's Steve Allen Show stint crushed Sullivan's numbers, his producer, Marlo Lewis, saw dollar signs. Swallowing his pride, Sullivan signed Elvis for 3 appearances in 1956 and 1957, shelling out a record-breaking $50,000, but with strict rules. No lower body shots to hide those scandalous hips. On September 9, 1956, Elvis took the stage with Don't Be Cruel, Love Me Tender, and a slightly tamed hound dog, drawing 60 million viewers, 82.6% of the TV audience, a ratings juggernaut that cemented his stardom. Sullivan, stunned by the frenzy and positive buzz, softened, inviting Elvis back twice more, and by January 1957, he was a convert, declaring on air, "This is a real, decent, fine boy," a jaw-dropping turnaround from his initial disgust. Elvis's appearances didn't just boost his fame. They legitimized rock and roll, cracking open the door for a new era, even if Sullivan's censorship, filming Elvis from the waist up, tried to keep it in check. The Sullivan stage became a battlefield where tradition met transformation, and Elvis, with his raw charisma, forced the old guard to bend. Buddy Holly, the bespectacled trailblazer of rock's early days, was another thorn in Sullivan's side. His hiccuping vocals and jangly hits like Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day defining a generation's sound. But his January 26, 1958, appearance with the Crickets turned into a showdown of wills. Sullivan, a control freak who vetted every lyric and stage move, balked at their hit "Oh Boy," deeming lines like "all of my love," "all of my kissing" too suggestive for his middle-class viewers. He demanded a safer song, but Holly, with quiet steel, refused, insisting on performing "Oh Boy" or nothing, a bold stand that infuriated Sullivan, who wasn't used to defiance. Backstage, the vibe was icy. Sullivan reportedly gave Holly the cold shoulder, and some say he sabotaged the band's sound mix, making their set harder to hear, a petty jab at the rebellious Texan. Yet Holly and the Crickets delivered, their raw energy cutting through the sabotage, thrilling the studio crowd and home viewers. Sullivan's half-hearted handshake post-show and refusal to rebook them left Holly bitter, but his defiance cemented his legend, proving he wasn't just a singer, but a symbol of rock's unbowed spirit. Tragically, Holly's life ended a year later in a 1959 plane crash at 22, but his clash with Sullivan echoed as a stand for artistic freedom, a middle finger to the establishment that resonated with fans and inspired countless musicians, from the Beatles to modern rockers. Bob Dylan, the scruffy folk poet, brought a different kind of rebellion to Sullivan's stage. His sharp-witted protest songs capturing the 1960s growing unrest. Invited in 1963 to perform Talkin' John Birch Paranoid Blues, a biting satire of Cold War paranoia, mocking the far-right John Birch Society, Dylan was set to introduce his cerebral edge to millions. Sullivan himself gave a nod during rehearsals, amused by the song's wit. But CBS executives, fearing lawsuits or backlash from conservative viewers, pulled the plug hours before the May 12th broadcast, demanding Dylan swap the song or change lyrics. At 21, with his career on the line, Dylan didn't flinch. He walked off, telling producers, "No song, no show," a move that stunned Sullivan and the network. The press ate it up, hailing Dylan's exit as a courageous stand for art over censorship, amplifying his cred as a truth-teller unafraid of corporate muscle. Far from tanking his career, the walkout boosted his mythos, spreading his music to a wider audience and cementing his image as a rebel with a cause. Sullivan later expressed regret over the network's meddling, admiring Dylan's raw talent, but the clash exposed a deeper divide. Dylan's provocative, socially charged art was at odds with the sanitized America Sullivan peddled, a rift that mirrored the era's cultural upheaval. The Beatles, those mop-topped Liverpool lads, were a cultural earthquake when they hit Sullivan's show on February 9, 1964, kicking off the British invasion with a performance that drew 73 million viewers, 34% of the U.S. population, and changed music forever. Sullivan, ever the ratings hound, spotted their star power in 1963 at London's Heathrow Airport, where screaming teens mobbed the band, echoing Elvis's mania. He booked them for 3 consecutive Sundays, a savvy bet that paid off as I Wanna Hold Your Hand topped charts and Beatlemania swept America. Their set, All My Loving, She Loves You, and more, sent girls into hysterics and parents into panic over their shaggy hair and cheeky vibe. Sullivan, a traditionalist who preferred polished acts, bristled at their irreverent humor, especially John Lennon's biting wit, and the chaos of their fans, with producers scrambling to manage screaming crowds and sound levels. He insisted on tight control over their set list and staging, wary of the frenzy, but the Beatles, in tailored suits, played ball, delivering disciplined performances that balanced charm and rebellion. Sullivan may have found their haircuts ridiculous and their attitude nervy, but he couldn't deny their draw, leaning into the mania for record-shattering ratings. Their appearances marked a seismic shift, ushering in a youth-driven era that Sullivan, despite his unease, helped amplify, cementing his role as a bridge between old-school decorum and rock's bold new world. James Brown, the godfather of soul, was a human dynamo whose explosive performances, gospel-charged vocals, frenetic splits, and sweat-soaked stagecraft challenged Sullivan's buttoned-up ideals like no other. His raw, unapologetically black energy, rooted in soul and rhythm, was a cultural lightning bolt in the racially tense 1960s, and his appearances on Sullivan's show were a tightrope walk between revolution and restraint. Sullivan, who championed polished acts like the Supremes, was uneasy with Brown's uncontainable intensity. His spins, shouts, and mic-throwing theatrics felt too wild, too physical for the host's family-friendly vision. Producers pushed Brown to dial back his act, framing his performances to soothe white viewers, but Brown, a force of nature, resisted, pouring every ounce of soul into his brief stage time. Songs like Papa's Got a Brand New Bag pulsed with a rawness that defied Sullivan's tight camera angles, electrifying audiences and proving America craved something real. Sullivan never fully embraced Brown's style, but he couldn't ignore the buzz. Brown's appearances were a cultural milestone, showcasing black pride and power on a mainstream stage. His refusal to shrink his art mirrored the era's civil rights struggles, making him a symbol of defiance and progress. Even if Sullivan's conservative lens struggled to contain him, the sixth hated singer isn't explicitly named in Sullivan's supposed list, but the pattern points to rock and soul rebels like Jerry Lee Lewis, whose wild piano pounding and suggestive Great Balls of Fire clashed with Sullivan's moral code. Or Jim Morrison of The Doors, who infamously defied orders to cut higher. From Light My Fire in 1967, enraging Sullivan so much he banned them for life. Sullivan's disdain wasn't just personal. It reflected his role as a cultural gatekeeper, a devout traditionalist wary of rock's raw energy, suggestive lyrics, and youth-driven rebellion. He clashed with artists who pushed boundaries, from Lewis's fiery antics to the Rolling Stones' edgy vibe, often demanding lyric changes or camera tricks to tame their impact. Yet, Sullivan was a pragmatist, ratings ruled, and he booked these acts despite his reservations, knowing they'd draw millions. His show became a paradox, a platform that launched rock's biggest names while trying to leash their spirit. Elvis, Holly, Dylan, the Beatles, Brown, and others like them didn't just perform. They reshaped culture, forcing Sullivan to bend to a new era. His rumored hate list, revealed near his 1974 death, wasn't just about personal grudges. It was a window into a man caught between tradition and a tidal wave of change, his stage a battleground where rock's rebels claimed victory, leaving a legacy that still echoes in music history.